Hello, everyone. First of all, let me thank Avtar to give Citi and me an opportunity to present on such a critically important topic, which is about diversity and inclusion, and as your topic says, to include fearlessly. This is a topic which is quite close to my heart, and it's a topic which is very close to Citi. And I think ultimately, we and other organizations all are endeavoring to make sure that our workforces can reflect the diversity which exists in our society. So to make sure that we're getting the best out of our resources, we're getting the best value for innovation. But first of all, let me start with a bit about my personal journey and how it fits into the topic today. So I started my career over 30 years back with Citi straight out of campus. And one of the prime reasons for me to join Citi was the attraction of joining a globally diverse company. And in the 30 years I've been, I had the privilege of working in India, London, Hong Kong, and now back in India. And after 8 years of starting off in India, I got an opportunity to move to London. And apart from the fact that London is a cosmopolitan, fairly welcoming city, I think what really made me comfortable was the fact that Citi already then and now was a globally diverse company. And I think that feeling of being at home, so you walked into an office and you were almost like you were in United Nations. And I'll give you an example. I was in a training course with some of my colleagues in Switzerland, and we were in a restaurant. And there was a group which was watching us while we were talking and drinking and eating. And then after a while, they walked up to us and said, "Can we guess that you guys work for United Nations?" And we said, "Well, no, but why?" And they said, "Because we've never seen, all of you guys seem to be from different countries, different accents, and they'd not seen companies that racially diverse as they saw our group to be." And I think to me, that's quite important. And I think that's something which certainly to me made it easy to make the transition. And I think I owe a lot to feeling comfortable in that environment. I think there were already at that time a number of senior leaders in the company, whether they were Indian or of other nationalities. So it always felt that you were comfortable to get your true self to work. Now, at that time, of course, I think the way we looked at diversity was more, and I'm talking, late 90s, was more in terms of your backgrounds and your nationalities and your languages and your races. And I think the whole concept around and focus around a broader set of diversity, whether it was gender diversity or pride networks, diversity of thought, special abilities, obviously came later. I think the diversity imperative to Citi, becomes quite obvious. And as you'll see in the slide, we are in over 100 countries. We are probably one of the most global companies in the world, and certainly the most global bank in the world. We have around 200,000 colleagues, of which 51% are actually female, which I think we're very proud of, that we're more than 50%. And as I said, multiple ethnicities, racial backgrounds, and cultures. And then in India is actually the third largest workforce for us within Citi. It's a very large number, and we have around 25,000 plus colleagues who work in India. And our diversity ratio overall is around 36%, but that also reflects the fact that in India, the women participation is also at a lower level. I think it's around 31%. And then 75% of our workforce is actually millennial. So I think, to me, the diversity imperative is really about the way the world is changing. So our societies are becoming more global, more digital. You have, all the millennials who are kind of born digital and very agile in that space. We are fast urbanizing, and our clients are reflecting that as well. Along with that, if you put the digital disruption, which is working at a fast pace in the world right now, and I think COVID only turbo accelerated that, I think there is a lot of upending of business models and thought processes which is happening. I think the need to learn, unlearn, and relearn is becoming something which you have as a given if you have to survive as a business in today's world. And I think our workforce, therefore, needs to reflect all these realities of what's happening around us. And I think diversity, like they say, is a fact. It's something which exists around us, but to do something about it is a conscious act. And I think, therefore, what I'd like to share is really the Citi perspectives and journey around what we are consciously acting on to make sure that we become as truly reflective of what is around us in our actual workforce. So I think if you look at the Citi journey, I think it's really, I would say, the last 6 or 7 years where the focus around gender diversity came about. And I'd probably say it was 2014-15. Our CEO at that time, Mike Cobat, I think put a lot of focus. We were one of the first companies globally which went out with hard numbers, which we put out there that we'd achieve an X percentage of diversity. I think we were certainly the first, one of the first financial institution to go public around pay equity, which was around equal pay for equal work and offering full transparency in terms of gender and race data around pay. And mind you, the reason why some of these distortions happen is because a number of the higher paid jobs were typically more with men. It wasn't as if we were consciously trying to pay women differently. But I think there is clearly a journey to try and get to a better pay equity. But again, very proud of the fact that we pioneered that trend. I think the hard goals were important because, and I'm looking back, and I used to be in London at that time, that was a time when there was a lot more focus about specific goals which each business was given, a lot more mentoring and training. And, you know, some of the concepts were new for us, such as the concept around unconscious bias, because, you know, in most companies, people by and large are not out there to create conscious biases. You always have some bad apples, but it was really the unconscious bias and getting people attuned to the way they think, because those are real barriers as you try and go down, you know, the diversity path. And I'm also struck, I'll share with you an example. We had invited in one of our diversity forums in Citi, the global treasurer of a Anglo-Australian large mining and natural resources company called BHP Billiton. And she was an Indian lady who was the global treasurer. And because BHP Billiton had set out they were one of the pioneers again of setting out aggressive goals for reaching diversity in an industry, mind you, which is not a very white collar industry. And one of the things which she said really struck with me. And what she said was that they were very focused to make sure diversity in their company was not only for offices, but actually in their minds. And they took the pain, and this is about acting fearlessly and boldly. They made an effort to actually remodel and re-engineer their mining equipment so women could use that equipment, because they wanted to really spread the diversity across in the company. And I think to me, what stuck was the length to which they went to try and, you know, to try and achieve, you know, more diverse workforce. And I think within Citi as well, and again, you know, the principles or the path to diversity is not very difficult, right? You hire more women, you retain more women, and you promote more women. And in our experience, I think hiring more women, and certainly from colleges and campuses, were actually relatively easily done. We were hiring around 49, 50% or thereabouts at our intake. But where I think we were suffering was as women went through a natural life cycle of change, you know, marriage, kids, we were losing women, especially at a crucial stage when they were getting into assistant vice president, middle management levels. And therefore, I think there was a lot of thought put around how do you help women go through that life cycle. And again, my experience there was, you know, there wasn't one rule which fit all. I mean, there were women who came back from maternity and left because their manager consciously thought, well, let's make it easy. She may not be able to work so hard on deals, etc., and let's give her an easy job. And the woman felt, well, you know, that means that my career growth won't be the same. So that's not great. Or on the other hand, women who genuinely needed more support because of that pressure and they didn't have it from the managers. So one of the things which was done is it was too important a journey back to work, which could be left only to managers, and therefore HR and I think in a very organized manner, we came with a number of programs to help and ease and mentor women as they came back from maternity. And I think that's having, at least from our perspective, a lot of positive impact. I think the other thing was really around creating a platform and providing visibility, because one of the things we found was women were more diffident than men about actually putting their hand up for jobs. And I think giving them the confidence to try to raise their hand up, giving them the pedestal, visibility, mentoring. And I think we found a number of programs which we set up were again hugely important to identify the talent and get them ready to tackle some of their own inhibitions about they were fully capable, but they were somehow holding themselves back more than men were. I think we recently came out with also a fairly aggressive goal, actually, where any position which opens at middle management levels, so in our hierarchy, that's around AVP, VP level, we need to have at least 2 women on the slate and 2 women on the interview panel. And I think we're finding that that's actually helping us. Now, in some businesses, it becomes harder, but the fact that you need to think harder and you need to therefore look externally with more focus is actually helping us, drive our diversity numbers higher. And as I mentioned, they're hard goals. And I think as a company now, at the middle management level, we are 40% women. And in India, we've actually moved the needle by 6% in the last 2 years. And we are currently over 25%. And obviously, that's not good enough. And I think the journey will carry on. I think the other thing I'll probably talk about is, I think, in my view, I think the COVID is a game changer in a variety of ways. I think around the way we work, the whole digital disruption, as we talked about earlier. And while I think in the short term, that was difficult for women because a number of them had obligations at home. And then, of course, they were doing, their work as well from home, and therefore perhaps having a double impact as working through COVID. But in the medium to long term, I think the fact that the future of work would have a large component of more flexible, more hybrid working, I think is actually going to unleash a big, powerful force, which actually helps, more women enter workforce and actually stay on longer, even when they go through changes which require a little more flexibility on their end. And I think it's not only women. I think the young people and across generations now, I think people seek more flexibility. And I think for all of us companies, I think that's something which we all have to think very seriously about. How do we give the work flexibility to try and retain the best talent? And I think before COVID, I think some of the companies did give flexibility to work from home, but there was always a little bit of taboo that, you were going to be a bit soft if you undertook to take that. And I think that taboo is gone, which from my perspective is very positive. Now, moving a bit away from gender diversity, and we talk about, the LGBTQ, the Pride movement, the generations across the ages, the special ability groups. And I think we are actually quite proud as an organization to also have a lot of focus around driving diversity around those parameters. So we were actually, I think, one of the first companies in India which launched Pride in 2019. And I think we recently introduced benefits equalization for same-sex partners. We have just tied up with our insurance providers to make sure that any cost of gender affirmation or a sex change surgery is actually picked up as well. Again, little measures, but all meant to make people feel supported around and bringing their natural self to work. We don't want people to feel that they need to hide something, because we know whenever people hide something, it causes stress. And then, of course, it affects how they would perform at work or how they feel respected in a workforce or normal society. I think we've also tried to promote a number of affinity networks. And I think we have around 10 affinity networks across 4 themes: women, pride, generations, which is really trying to bring the young and the not so young together, and the concept of reverse mentoring, which I think is quite powerful, especially as we go through the kind of tech disruption which we're going through, and then special abilities, disabilities. Again, some other bold things, and I'm very proud actually of the fact that I think some of the bolder measures we have taken. So some of the Citi leaders, Jane Fraser, Mark Mason, who's our CFO, Sarah Rector, who's our HR head globally, have been very bold in terms of coming out with very public announcements, whether it was around Black Lives Matter, around other issues on pay equity and other diversity issues. And I feel very proud that Citi is actually taking a lead. We recently globally also came out with a self-ID program, which is a voluntary confidential program where people can identify their sexual orientation. And the idea here is just, we want to get better data so we can try and make sure we are devising programs and being sensitive to people's needs to make sure they can excel. I think then if we talk about the impact or the benefits of having a more diverse and inclusive workforce, I mean, there are a number of studies which show that actually companies which are more diverse are actually better performers, whether it's their shareholder returns or stock market performance. There is obviously a stakeholder pressure as the ESG agenda becomes more and more important and prevalent. All the stakeholders, whether it's boards, your governments, communities, your employees, everybody is expecting companies to do better on the diversity goals. Our clients expect it, and if we have to be an employer of choice, I think certainly that's a very important thing for us to attract the best talent. And finally, I'd say to get the right innovative thought process and diversity in thought. To come to close, I think if I can share some of our key learnings as we are going through this journey, which is still a journey. I think we've made good progress, but there's a lot more to do. I think some of the things which matter: tone from the top. So senior management, and it has to be CEO down, repeating, putting hard goals, and then of course you've got to spread the message. So it's not only coming from the top, but you need to, especially to the people managers, that this is something which we all need to embrace if we have to make progress. I think being systematic, so creating policies, programs in a very systematic manner, and I outlined some of them when we spoke earlier, I think becomes quite critical. And ultimately, as they say, if you can't measure it, you can't track it. So you've got to have metrics which you track and measure people against. You've got to stay the course. And as I said, we have made progress. In the end, and I think you'll see it on the slide, I think, and sometimes you need an event to lead to change. And I think in 1941, when the World War II was on, and all the men who used to work for Citibank in New York at those days were sent off to war, and women who typically were doing jobs which are more secretarial or stenographers, etc., were all given training, business training, to take on jobs like tellers and other more important jobs, and they were trained for it. And from that 1941 to now having the first Wall Street woman CEO in Jane Fraser, I think we are very proud of the journey we've made on the gender diversity side. And secondly, then on supporting people with special abilities, I think in 1984, Citi in New York sponsored and did a lot of community funding for the international special ability games. And then to 2020 Tokyo Olympics, where actually we are a part of the International Paralympic Committee. We support the National Paralympic Committees in 23 countries, and again, trying to support a lot of the special ability people as a very strong message. So I'll probably end on that note, and thank you for the opportunity. And as I said, this is a journey, and I think if anything, we are more and more passionate to drive and change. And as I think Avtar talks about, drive the change in a fearless, courageous manner. Thank you.